Our next speaker, you just heard an amazing presentation about the types of dementia and its stages. And I don't know about you, but I was almost overwhelmed by all of that information that I didn't know very much about. Now let's move into a different aspect of the end stages of dementia, when it's time to consider hospice. Here to talk about that phase is Dr. Richard Deibert. Dr. Deibert is Associate Medical Director for Tidewell Hospice, serving home, assisted living, and long-term patients across the Bay in Manatee and Sarasota counties. Inspired by the mystery of human suffering, Dr. Deibert decided in college to combine medicine and ministry. Majoring in religion at Davidson College in North Carolina, he attended the University of Florida for his MD, Emory University for his internship in medicine and pediatrics, and Columbia Theological Seminary for his Master's of Divinity. He was ordained as a Presbyterian minister, and with his wife Elizabeth, who is also a Presbyterian minister, has served churches in Alabama, North Carolina, and Florida, alongside of which Dr. Deibert practiced family medicine. They hauled their 4 young children to England for several years, where he completed a PhD in New Testament at the University of Cambridge on the Apostle Paul's Theology of Death, published this month by Moore Siebeck in Germany. His work as a hospice physician with patients at the end of their earthly life is an ideal arena in which to practice medicine as ministry and ministry as medicine. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to my friend, Dr. Richard Deibert.
Thank you very much, everyone here, and thank you, David. I am a theologian stuck in a physician's body. And for me, dementia is a spiritual crisis, a fundamental spiritual crisis for the particular individual and for the family of care and for the community of care and really for the nation and the global community as well. It is a huge issue. But for me, it's essentially a spiritual crisis. It asks the largest questions about God and justice and mercy and suffering and redemption. And so it is my plan today to put this conversation about dementia into a framework for you that might be somewhat new, although I think familiar. I want to give you a larger picture of the issue from a spiritual point of view and also from a physical point of view, because I never pulled those two apart completely. It will be some repetition. I've not been here to see or hear the other speakers today, so forgive me for some repetition, which I will move through rather quickly. So I want to begin with this image. And I want to say that the subtitle there, Preserving the Glory of Our Humanity, is the essence of the spiritual crisis, because dementia strikes at the glory of our humanity. And I hope you understand that a little more clearly in just a few minutes. This is a cross-section of a tree, some say. But actually, it's a representation of every single form of life on the planet Earth. And I want to zoom in a little bit because I want you to find your home. There are 5 kingdoms of earthly life. There's a kingdom Animalia, a kingdom of plants, a kingdom of fungus, a kingdom of my vision of there's a kingdom of bacteria and a kingdom of protea. And we, of course, are in the kingdom Animalia, in which there are approximately a million species. I'm going to draw you in closer to your position in the global Earth. That's where you and I are. Now, there we are in all the species of life, known life on the planet Earth. We have a northern neighbor called Musculus. Does anyone know who our northern neighbor is? Musculus. It's Latin for literally mouse mousy. It's a common house mouse, is our northern neighbor on the tree of life. Let's move now to the southern neighbor, Typhlonectes natans. Typhlonectes natans literally means a blind swimmer swimming, and it is a rubber eel. That's our southern neighbor on the tree of life. So that's where we are, and I want to raise this question about the distinctiveness of our species among all the species and forms of life on the planet, because that's the question that is at the heart of the disease of dementia in any form. It's really a question of anthropology. What does it mean to be a human being? Anthropology, the study of humanness. What does it mean to be a you in a more particular way? That's anthropology. Now, we could answer this question about anthropology scientifically, okay? And some of you are familiar with the scientific taxonomy of anthropology. We have a kingdom, a phylum, a class, an order, a family, a genus, a species, and a subspecies. We are the Homo sapiens sapiens. That's literally our technical taxonomical reference in the kingdom of Animalia. Now, does anybody know what sapiens means? Sapiens is a Latin word which means wisdom. We are named literally for the one human animal on the face of the earth that is capable of wisdom. I want you to think about this. Again, I'm putting a larger framework around the question of dementia. So we are named for our capacity to be wise, to make discernments that are wise. So when you're caring for a human person who is afflicted in any way whatsoever, but in particular with dementia, you're caring for the only creature on the planet Earth that is capable of wisdom. What is wisdom? Think about that for a second, because I want the preciousness of your work to rise up before you. What is wisdom? I have my definition, and here it is. If I had time, I'd probe you a little bit more. But here's my definition. Wisdom is the capacity to know what is true, what is right, and what is lasting eternally. That's my understanding of what wisdom is. And we are the only species, the only animal on the face of the earth that has the capacity to know what is true, to discern what is right, and to discern what is eternal, what lasts. Okay, again, I want your patience, your care partners to loom before you in the glory, the beauty, the undeniable goodness of their humanity, because that's why you are a caregiver. That's what you are defending, protecting, saving, is the glory of their humanity. And so I'm trying to get a different kind of sense of that for you. All right. Now, another way to look at this is that we have, as human persons, a visible part, dimension, if you will, and an invisible dimension or part. Most of us intuit this. So there's a visible part of a human person, and there is an invisible part. I've used colors here to help us a little bit. The red is the body. That's the visible part. Then there's this thing or dimension, what have you. We could talk about this for hours, called soul. And I would say that at the heart of soul, there is something even more focused and distinctive called spirit. So I want to put the human person in front of you in a little bit of a different way, with visible and invisible dimensions. You know you have them. And I'm afraid that scientific medicine and the scientific Western world view only values or reduces what is valuable mostly to what is material and visible and measurable and sensible, quantifiable, reproducible, studyable. And it neglects the larger part of us as human persons that's invisible and not measurable and not sensible and not even immediately perceptible. So I'm using those terms, body, soul, and spirit. So let's define them just a little bit. The body, of course, is the material presence, the physical part of us, the sensual part of us, spatial, it's temporal, it lives in time, and time affects our bodies, and it is historical. We, with our bodies, make history. We create narratives. So that's essentially our physical part in one perspective. Our soul, what do I mean by soul? Well, just call it the breath of life. We have this mysterious life in us that I call soul. If you unpack that a little bit, soul, we're not any different from any other animals with a body. But all animals have bodies, a material presence, and they share that with us. Do animals have souls? I think so. My golden retriever has a soul, and he will manifest it at times. And by that, it's the breath of life. It's that mysterious, surging life that is perceptual. It's emotional. These things are not material now. Perceptual, emotional, it's rational. We're beginning to climb the scale a little bit. I'm leaving my golden retriever behind a little bit. He's a little rational at times, but not as much as I am, for sure. Analytical, well, I'm losing my golden retriever. Discursive, well, we don't have conversations that go on in any depth, back and forth dialogue. The soul abstracts. My golden retriever doesn't really abstract, can't create art intentionally. Okay, we're beginning to separate the human person, the human animal, from all other animals here. Becomes creative and becomes self-conscious. My golden retriever is not self-conscious. There are only about 5 animals on the face of the earth that can pass a mirror test and understand that when they stand in front of it, that it's them they are standing in front of. It's a porpoise, it's a magpie, an orangutan, I think, can pass the mirror test. So there aren't many animals that are self-conscious, and certainly not with the depth of soul that we have. And yet, we share our soul to some extent with other animals. It's a rational kind of cognition of knowing. Okay? Now let's unpack spirit for a second, because I'm going to call spirit the breath of God. Just consider that a transcendent gift. A transcendent gift that makes you as a human. I'm going to call it distinctive, unshared by any other animal. It is a kind of spiritual intellect, if you will. It operates with the help of reason, the soul's reasoning power, but it operates also independently of that. It does not, our human spirit does not depend on our body or our soul. This is vitally important. Because when you stand in front and care for a terminal Alzheimer's patient, late stage, terminal is even the latest that I stand in front of every day of the week. The question of who you are standing in front of is a huge question. It is the preeminent question. Are they simply a material mass whose brain has essentially died? Or is there something that's preserved in that human person? And I'm going to make the argument throughout this presentation that the human spirit is preserved. It uses the body's input, it uses the soul's rational discourse and perception, but it does not depend on them for its understanding, its awareness. It's a big, big question. So, the Spirit allows us to apprehend the inner essence. This is philosophical talk now because we have to. We're talking about something that's invisible. The Spirit allows us to apprehend the inner essence of that water bottle. What is its purpose? Everything has a transcendent meaning, and our spirits give us that perceptual power to apprehend the transcendent meaning of everything, and especially the interpersonal transcendent meaning of another human being. The Spirit is what allows us to commune in a dialogue, in an interpersonal, subjective dialogue with God. That's our Spirit's capacity that we have. Our Spirit is a trans-rational kind of knowing. It uses reason, but it's above reason. It transcends reason. It sees things that reason and rationality cannot see. And the term for that is noesis, noetic. It's a noetic kind of understanding. Intuition, perhaps, comes close to that. It's a deep, deep sense that this is true and right and lasting. And it is what distinguishes us as the human animal from all others. And it comes from the Greek noun nous, which is also translated mind or spirit. So, this is another way to image what it means to be human. To have a body, which we share with animals. To have a soul, which we share with many animals. But to have a spirit, which is distinctive and which gives us a special perceptual capacity. Okay? Now let's talk about dementia. You might have addressed this already, but what is the origin of the word dementia? Dementia. Okay, it's a Latin word. It comes from the word dement. That's Latin for the prefix de, away from, and mens, mind or spirit. So dementia, if you take dementia, a person suffering dementia is suffering a distance from his or her mind or spirit. A dementia. They are being removed from their mind and spirit to some extent. Okay? Another way to say that is a Homo sapiens sapiens, you and me, who suffers from dementia is distanced from the very feature that distinguishes him or her from all other animals, from sapience, from the capacity for wisdom. So dementia is a challenge to our humanity in a fundamental way, the deepest way possible. The one thing that distinguishes us from all other animals, dementia is trying to distance us from. Importantly, not remove us from, but it's distancing us. So, when you have a patient who has dementia and who is in excruciating pain, their body is, from the dementia, is interfering with their mind, their ability to perceive truth. Nausea and vomiting, shortness of breath, weakness and fatigue, anorexia, cachexia, all those things from the body and the soul in dementia, in end-stage dementia, are attacking, removing that human person from his or her, challenging that human person's ability to perceive truth and beauty and goodness and what is right and eternal. So a human suffering dementia is challenged in their capacity to be wise. Again, I'm giving you a different framework for this question because I want it to be a huge question at the end of this. Now, what's vitally important to me is that a human can never become a non-human. Now, think about that for a second. Sometimes we act like this, and sometimes we believe that people can act in non-human ways, but I don't think a human person can ever become non-human, can never lose completely his or her mind or spirit. They can never become unminded or unspirited, if you will. It may be buried there, but it's never lost. Okay? Now, dementia is devastating. This is obvious to you, of all people. Dementia is totalizing. Totalizing. It affects every dimension of human personhood, the physical, the psychological, the spiritual, and the social. It fractures human identity. There's nothing left of us that's not in some way assaulted by dementia. Some people speak of the 4 A's of Alzheimer's: amnesia, a memory issue; aphasia, a language issue; apraxia, a doing practical issue, a body issue; and agnosia, a recognition or perceptual issue. Dementia is progressive. It's progressive. It's relentlessly spiraling downward. The brain in dementia is dying for some reason. Dementia is irreversible. It's irreversible. In almost all cases, there are some reversible dementias from acute illnesses, but most dementia that we deal with in hospice and end-of-life care are irreversible. Pay attention to the name Teepa Snow. Teepa Snow is in Sarasota at the Pines. She's done marvelous work with dementia patients, emphasizing the goodness, their functional capacity, helping caregivers. Pay attention, get her videos, look at them, listen to her, watch her. She's wonderful. She writes about the irreversibility of dementia. Your reality and my reality can never be the same again. When I read that, it just jumped out at me with my patients, recognizing that those two realities that each knew are never going to be the same again. It's irreversible. Dementia is variable. It varies from moment to moment, from morning to night, from day to day, and from person to person. It's very variable. It's slippery. And dementia is predictable. Most dementias have a pattern that unfolds and is predictable. And dementia is terminal. Dementia is terminal. Now, I want to emphasize this point because dementia needs to be understood as a terminal disease, just like end-stage heart failure, just like cancer. And because we do not easily recognize dementia as a terminal disease, we really shortchange the patient and the family system and the community. And I'll explain that in just a second. But you've seen the landscape of dementia here. 14%, 1/7 of you of us 70 or older are going to have dementia in some form. If you reach 90, it'll be 1 out of every 3. You know these. It's not a normal part of aging. That's an illusion and a myth. It is not a disease itself per se, but a group of symptoms that's caused by a disease. The common dementias are Alzheimer's, the most common by far, 50 to 70% of dementias. Average life expectancy, 8 to 12 years. Vascular dementia is the second most common. This is a little bit arguable, but this is my experience actually in hospice. 15 to 20% of dementia. It's very variable in its life expectancy, 3 to 30 years. Dementia with Lewy bodies. Lewy body dementia is the third most common, 8 to 15%. 7 to 9 years life expectancy. And then frontotemporal dementia is the least common. Pick's disease, the old Pick's disease, 5% of dementia, 7 to 13 years. Median survival for all types of dementia is roughly 5 years from the time of diagnosis. Group all the dementias together, and your median time of survival is 5 years. There are many cancers now, terminal cancers, that have longer life expectancies than the median life expectancy of dementia. So it is a terminal disease. Alzheimer's disease is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. Currently, there are 5.5 million people afflicted with Alzheimer's. at $200 billion for the caregiving expense. In 2015, that will triple to 16 million afflicted Americans at the cost of $1.1 trillion in caregiving. Now, dementia is a terminal illness. I want you to indulge me here while I read this long quote. It comes from a very fine paper at the bottom there, Caring for the Patient with End-Stage Dementia. Dementia must be considered as much of a terminal disease as advanced cancer or heart failure. Yet there is ample evidence that individuals with end-stage dementia receive suboptimal end-of-life care and often experience unrelieved suffering. According to a 2005 study, approximately 2/3 of nursing home residents with dementia did not receive hospice care at the end of their life. Most lay people and many healthcare professionals find it difficult to view dementia as a terminal illness, difficult to conceptualize an illness mostly characterized by cognitive impairment leading to cardiopulmonary arrest in the same way as end-stage malignancy or organ failure. Severe dementia may be conceived of as a brain failure, just as severe cardiomyopathy is conceived of as heart failure. How willing we are to say, I have heart failure. How unwilling we are to say, I have brain failure. Think about that. The failure to view dementia as a terminal condition not only deprives the patient and family of compassionate end-of-life care, but can also result in overly aggressive treatment that would never be considered in more traditionally viewed terminal conditions such as cancer or heart failure. It robs the patient and the family of the very best care at the end of life because we do not recognize it naturally as a terminal illness when all the data is staring us in the face. So I want to change the equation, help us to change the equation in our approach to this disease. It is not a shameful thing to say we are terminal. We should not be afraid of dying. So, late stage Alzheimer's dementia, the person presenting before went through this. It's typically described in 7 stages. The late stage is 7 or higher. That's the terminal stage that I work with. There's the FAST, the functional assessment staging of Alzheimer's, the FAST scale that is so important to my work and helps us descriptively recognize where the patient is in the linear descent of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is unique in the dementias because there's a linear decline. There is no reversal for the most part in Alzheimer's. It is a relentless march downward in terms of function. And so we have this wonderful staging system that helps locate us in the illness. Now, the dementia that I am related to mostly is late-stage dementia. And that's circled there, the 7s and above. You know that you are in a late-stage dementia when language is affected. Language is so important to the human person. Far more important than walking in terms of putting you on the FAST scale somewhere, because language is so complex in activity. But when a patient begins to lose language, a 7A is the ability to speak only a half a dozen words in a day, or intelligible words, or in an interview. A 7B patient has only one word that they may repeat all day long or in an interview, one intelligible word. This is very accurate. Long-term caregivers recognize this. After you move from 7B, you lose the ability to speak intelligibly. In 7C, you are immobile. You can no longer ambulate. 7D, you can't sit up without truncal support. 7E, your smile goes away, a tragic thing. And 7F is the loss of the ability to hold your head up. So that's the fast staging, late stage Alzheimer's. To get into hospice as a hospice patient for Alzheimer's dementia, you must be a stage 7C, no longer walking. These rules are bendable, but this is Medicare's rule, a 7C or higher or lower in your functional assessment, and you must have one of these comorbidities, of usually infectious causes or weight loss, dietary issues. So those two things, as I take hospice admissions, I look for these two criteria that Medicare says you can't really have a patient with a terminal diagnosis of Alzheimer's unless they are late in the stage. It's very difficult to prognosticate life expectancy for Alzheimer's. But we do know that a 7C Alzheimer's patient correlates the best or higher than or lower than 7C with a 6-month terminal prognosis. And that's the hospice benefit that you all own because you've paid taxes. You have a 6-month hospice benefit. And it's tragic to me every single day of my work to have patients who are admitted with late-stage Alzheimer's disease and they die in 3 days and they've had a 6-month benefit or longer. We could have been ministering to this family and helping them and this patient have a good end of life, and they wait and they don't understand that. And help me. So here's the picture of terminal Alzheimer's disease. It's an ugly picture. It's not absent of beauty. They cannot use or understand words or speech. Now I'm talking about 7C or above. These patients are late-stage terminal Alzheimer's. No words or speech. They cannot recognize themselves or their family members. They cannot care for themselves. They cannot control their bowels or bladder. They have global incontinence. They have frequent falling, have progressed to an inability to move. They require total care, total dependence on others for the activities of daily living, the ADLs that we take for granted. And you know those ADLs well. So what is a caregiver to do? Well, here's the golden key, in my opinion. The golden key is to immediately plan ahead. At the moment of diagnosis, don't waste any time in planning ahead. Let me say, do not waste any time in planning, in talking honestly, in making plans. So, upon diagnosis, involve the patient with the decision-making for the completion of all advanced directives. Get the ownership of the patient. Get the will done so that they're happy with it. Get the healthcare surrogate appointed. Get a legal power of attorney in order that's trustworthy. Talk through the plans with the patient immediately while they're well for a living will. Include a conversation about food and fluids at the end of life, about a feeding tube. Don't talk concretely about feeding tubes, which generally do more harm at the end of life than they do good. This is widely recognized, widely documented, widely studied now. Cross specialties in American healthcare, feeding tubes have a very narrow place at the end of life. So there needs to be talk about that, understand the process that's natural. The withdrawal from nutrition, the withdrawal from hydration, that's a natural part of the end of life. Cachexia, the natural cachexia interactions, the natural dying away of appetite. Talk about this stuff. And make a commitment at some point to a do not hospitalize order. Not a do not resuscitate order, that's important, but a do not hospitalize order. Our patients are constantly ending up in the emergency room, and it's 100% of the time devastating to them in late-stage terminal dementia. So unless you talk about this and plan ahead early on, you will not be able to avoid it. Our system is tilted toward acute care. You will be rushed by the EMT. They have no legal option if you don't have your DNR on display or your patient's DNR. If you don't have a do not hospitalize order with your physician, that you've decided no further hospitalization so that neighbors can't come in and send your loved one to the hospital. So those are planning. Meaningful advanced care planning ahead will greatly decrease the risk of overly aggressive treatment and reduce overall suffering for the patient and family. This is very true. Planning ahead creates a personal sense of control and ownership, as well as a deeper sense of safety and protection for the patient and for the family. Everybody feels better about the end of life if they have planned it. And it leaves a legacy for the generations to come that literally changes their lives if they think back and know that they have worked together as a team to realize the desire and will and wishes of the loved one and the family system. They look back on that and they glow with pride and confidence that they have done good. And it changes lives. My mother's death like this has changed my life. Her serenity, her planning, has been a gift to me that pays me every day as I think back on what a gift it was. That we didn't wrestle and fight in chaos with acute care intubation and ICUs and antibiotics and feeding tubes. She marched through it with dignity and grace. And it's changed my life and my kids' lives. And it's important. So I've got some nuggets here to close up with about communicating. And these nuggets are, I mean these also for terminal, unconscious, poorly responsive, terminal patients who have no language, no sounds except groans, who have no movement, who can't feed themselves. They're utterly dependent. It is the most pitiful picture of humanity at one level, but on another level, they still are human animals with a glorious humanity. And I do believe that they have a spirit, a mind deep inside themselves that still makes them who they are, and still communicates with the world around them and with God. I believe that with all my heart. That's why my golden rule is you never talk over a patient in their presence. No matter what their condition is, you respect their dignity and you assume that they are intact. There's an interaction going on with the environment and with those human persons who are in that environment. So, remember the patient is childlike, not childish. He or she still contains a whole lifetime of adult experience. It's not gone just because the memory is not there or the ability to retrieve it. Create a familiar and friendly and healing environment. Why do families not recreate in a nursing home? Why do they not recreate the home setting? I do not understand. It makes a total difference when a patient has familiar paintings and artwork and photos and fabrics and plants. Exploit the power of nonverbal communication. 80% of normal communication is nonverbal, so exploit it. Be careful with your vocal tone, your volume, your facial expressions, your body language, object usage, idioms, and figures of speech may be lost, so don't use them. Experiment with communication techniques. Vary it every time you're with the patient. Experiment. The disease is changing. Listen. Refrain from over-speaking or over-helping when they're trying to fill in a word if they still have language. Listen. Even listen to a wordless patient. Listen with your eyes. Listen with your spirit. Keep sentences short, conversations brief. Give breaks in between paragraphs. Give everybody time to rest, including yourself. Reassure with words and careful, non-threatening touch. Use touch to communicate. Remember that unintelligible vocalizations by the patient have meaning. They have an inherent meaning, so you have to be a detective. You have to go after that meaning in an unassuming way. Try to find out. Don't over-assume. A lot of times it's a mystery. Watch patients' non-vocalized movements. Watch their gestures, their expressions, their subtle behaviors. Explain simply and slowly what you are about to do or what is about to happen with the patient. Never, never argue with the patient. It's useless. Avoid questions or conversations that force the patient to draw on memory too deeply. Don't push that envelope. Use the patient's name and identify yourself every time. Don't assume that your mother still knows you by name. Identify yourself. Never speak condescendingly. Never speak down to a patient. Never speak over the patient or about the patient in his or her presence, even if she's unconscious. Never take things personally or show an insult if they cuss at you or if they insult you directly. Don't take an insult. Don't take. Use different forms of memory. The semantic memory is one. The implicit memory is another. The motor memory, and above all, the affective memory, the memory of emotions, feelings. Use music, use aroma, use nature, change the environment. Draw on that affective memory, which really never goes away. And this is where music is breaking new ground all over the place with dementia. And lastly, but not leastly, remember that the relationship is the most important, not the outcome of one encounter. It is the relationship that is still intact, and it transcends the encounter in that moment. So just do everything you can to preserve it. Thank you for your time and for your patience, for your care.